Warm greetings, everyone. Welcome to another session of Friday Waters Thesis Club. The Friday Water series is an extension of the flagship program Wednesdays for Water of the W4W Foundation. The idea of Friday Waters is to wet the Fridays with fun-filled and yet fruitful activities for the future generation. Friday Water series has water talkies, book reading, thesis club, which is today, water arts, and meet a maestro. Some of them taking place every month, depending on the speaker's availability. The focus of the Friday Waters Thesis Club is on bringing students and scholars who have done or are doing research on some aspects of water into the session in order to understand and discuss with them their identified problem, aim, objectives, methodology, research, design, fieldwork, findings, initial findings rather, and learning. In the process, to know about the making of the research and the contribution the researcher and the research aims to make in the science and the society. The session is also meant to increase the outreach of the research and the researcher. My name is Mansee Bal Bhargava, and I am the host from W4W and in Water Resource Council of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. For today's session, we welcome Dr. Pintu Kumar Mahla to share a topic of interest and recently completed PhD research and also ongoing postdoc research on role of gender, water, and peace and security. Welcome, Pintu Kumar, and may I now really set the games, the rule of the games, and then you can take it further from here. But before I request you to make your presentation, let me just give a brief overview of your biography, just for record's sake, and then later people can discuss it further. Dr. Pintu Kumar Mahla served as an assistant professor in Department of Arts at the School of Liberal Arts and Sciences, Modi University of Science and Technology, Rajasthan, in India. Currently, he is a research associate at the Defense Research and Studies, and I think he's also doing his postdoc research at University of Arizona in Tucson. Dr. Mahla's research focuses on the hydropolitical nexus between transboundary issues, exploring its geopolitical ramifications and broader implications for regional dynamics. His work spans from local to international issues, covering topics such as water security and governance, climate change, and transboundary aquifer assessments in South Asia. In addition to his academic work, he has also worked at several prestigious think tanks, including Non-Traditional Security Center, MPIDSA in India, Observer Research Foundation, and he has earned his PhD in National Security Studies from the Central University of Jammu, India. His thesis, Hydropolitics of China and Pakistan in the Trans-Himalayan region, which is where he specialized also, as I mentioned, and its implication on India's national security since 2010. His research also addresses climate change, effects on water resources, the relevance of the transboundary water relations we have with neighboring countries. And importantly, I think he's also going to talk about how the role of gender matters in securing peace and water security. Thank you, Pintu Kumar. And I also welcome Professor Sonia Gupta from Oxford University, who will be a discussant after Pintu makes his presentation. Dr. Pintu, you will have 25 minutes to make your presentation, and then Sonia and myself will take up questions with you. Over to you, and thanks once again for accepting our invitation. And I know it's a very early morning for you sitting there in the US. Over to you.
Yeah, I'm so very sorry. I'm so very sorry. I got caught up in an emergency, couldn't even text.
Oh.
But yes, please, Dr. Pintu, go ahead and we'll take up the questions.
Yes, thank you, Sonia.
Okay, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Mansee ma'am and Sonia Gupta ma'am, for inviting me to have a discussion on the role of gender in the water and peace and security. So I'm just sharing my screen, and let me know if it is full.
Yes, it's visible.
It's visible now. Okay. So today we are going to going to do a discussions on the what is the basic role of gender in water and peace and security, because it's a most important aspect to discuss rather than just talking about the only the security aspect of the water, scarcity or aspect of the water, and peace aspect of the water. So this is the thing where we are currently facing the lacuna in the non-traditional security threats. So moving forward, generally, if we ask that women, boys, men, girls, and marginalized groups play a variety of role when it comes to water. These gender roles are shaped by the norms which vary for the different contexts, situations, and identities. This means that different groups of the people experience the distinct impacts it comes to the water and conflict, but they can also play a unique and important role in the building peace. So out of the women, men, boys, and girls, I'm generally my research is generally especially focuses on the role of the women in the water and peace and security. So with moving forward, I have certain research objectives for my research, and the as we can see in the slides that the broader aim of my research, that is the to examine the broader role of the gender, especially women in the water, peace, and security. If we go by the specifically, that is to trace the evolution of the hydrofeminism in India by examining the intersections with the feminist theories, ecological justice framework, particularly in the context of the water governance. We have so many examples like the ecofeminism. Then we go by the, specifically to the point, that is the hydrofeminism. So I have taken these two theories specifically to describe the role of the woman. And secondly, to analyze the gender dimensions of the water insecurity and the governance. Further moving on to critically assess the systematic exclusion of the women from the decision-making process in the water management and governance. And finally, the most important aim, that is to investigate the role of the grassroots water movements. We have so many examples like in the grassroots hydrofeminist movement from the Maharashtra and the Haryana. So to investigate the role of the grassroots water movement and the gender mainstreaming initiatives through qualitative case studies, identifying how women ecological knowledge and the leadership can shape the inclusive and sustainable water governance. And basically, I have adopted the deductive approach. And we know that the Aristotle has a very great stance on the deductive approach. So I have adopted that thing because on the first stand I described the ecofeminism. Then if we go specifically, I have mentioned about the hydrofeminism. So it's a kind of the process of the deductive approach. So I have adapted this kind of the methodology on the basis of theoretical foundations. I have taken the concept of the ecofeminism, intersectionality, the role of the class, caste, in framing the water governance policies, specifically in reference to the women, and the concept of the political ecology. To I have taken these all the three concepts to conceptualize the hydrofeminism. It's a kind of the dynamic intersectional discourse. And I have also done the comparative analysis, and as we go on the contextual focus, and then I have focused on the concept of the water security that is intersects with the gender, labor, caste, and socioeconomic inequalities. As we focus on the methodologies, so I have taken the mostly the secondary data, documented case studies, and with acknowledging the limitations in the availability and the scope on the basis of so much literature-based synthesis. So basically, my research has an aim, and whatever the contribution, that is to seek the bridge and the theoretical insights with the real world challenges. and it basically demonstrates the transforming possibilities and the constraints of the hydrofeminism in the India's social political context. So before going to the main research thing of my part, so I have little video on that. So kindly have a patience to see this video of around the 1 or 2 minutes. So I'm just playing the video. So since I have said that I have adapted the deductive approach, so in the following slides, firstly I will share there is a showcase of the data according to the UN. Then in between the slides, I will also have a showcase of the the data based on the Indian firms. So before moving to the research, we have to know about the real situation of the women on the world level or the India level also in the water governance and the security aspects. So as we will go through the UN documents and the case studies, we get to know that more than the 8 lakh women lose their lives every year due to the insufficient access to the safe water sanitations and the hygienes. And around the there has been data from the 22 countries shows that women are more likely to say that they struggle financially to pay the utility bills, including the water bills. It's a kind of the 13% of women versus the 11% of the men. So women in the lower, income households are more likely to report water quality concerns compared to the women in the higher income households. So this is particularly about the is a kind of the stigmatizations of the women in the water policy and governance. As we move further, then as you can see, this is the regarding the distribution of the household water collections responsibilities. So how the women get stigmatized in the water governance. So as you can see in the figure, that is illustrate the how the water collections responsibilities are distributed by the gender, and as you can see the reason also, considering both the on-premises and the off-premises sources. So basically, my context is that the availability of the water at home varies significantly across the different regions. And in areas where the water is not readily accessible on the site, women are more frequently tasked with the collecting it than men. For instance, in the rural parts of the Asia, when access to the household water is particularly scarce, women aged 15 years and old primarily handle water collection duties. And specifically, if we talk about the case of the India is particularly vulnerable to the burden of the water collections. A study conducted in the Haryana that is in India, found that women on average collected water 23 times per day during the summer months. That is the, this is the whole aspect of the world level. And I have just mentioned about the, the aspects of the India. And you can, if you want to get scratch the further research on these role of women, you can go on these documents that is preferably has been carried out by the United Nations, the World's Movement 2015. So, if you see the for centuries, women have played a very central role in the water collections, conservations, management across diverse cultures and geographies. So they have the very significant role in moving that thing. So if we go contextually, that water scarcity and the pollution disproportionately affect women, particularly in the marginalized communities. As the primary caregiver and manager of the households, water women bear the brunt of the water-related crisis. Scarcity forces the woman to travel a greater distance to the fetch water, consuming the significant amount of the times and the energy. This is a very big problem. And if we go by the data on thing, the United Nations International Drinking Water Supply Sanitation's decade, that is from the 1981 to the 1990, brought the global attention to the gendered impact of the water scarcity. That is catalyzes the policy changes that recognize the women's contributions to the water governance and the policies. So there are many instances the way the UN has mentioned the significance and the role of the women, particularly in the UN water thing, and specifically on the sustainable development goals. They have mentioned the so much significance of the role of the woman in that thing. If we talk about the social economically perspective, the water insecurity reinforces the gender inequalities, women disproportionately responsible for the water management in their households. So other than these, UN exposes to the gender's role, that as you can see in the slide, the World Bank has also come up with the 8 most gender-based water challenges. And given that these challenges indicate that these are the barriers to the development, approaches must be intersectoral and holistic, while also being the specific enough to target those most affected, that is women and the girls. So gender mainstreaming has been proposed to combat the water-related and the gender-based challenges in that thing. So basically, my point is that the gender disparities in the water governance are deeply entrenched, with women often bearing the primary responsibility of the fetching the water or managing the water in their households or basically in the rural areas. And instead of that thing, they are excluded from the decision making process thing. So you see, in 2023, an estimated 380 million women and girls in living the countries with the higher stresses, higher or the critical water stresses. So this shows that the women's inequalities in the rural areas are growing so much. And in the previous slides, I also mentioned about that there should be the sectorial approach. And there is, because there has been that is the place where the woman faces the most disregardness in the managing the water governance or water management, because is like a caste is a kind of the social rigid stratification system in India, as we know that, and it dictates the access to the resources that is includes water. So women from the lower caste communities such as the Dalits and often face the systematic exclusion from the said water resources, like fetching the water from the wells. Is a kind of the very, is a kind of the big dilemma for the Dalit women to fetch the water from that the higher caste wells. So we have so many examples like that. The upper caste households frequently prohibit the Dalits from using the communal wells. And this is has been the, this is the well-established research has been carried out by the Research Foundation for the Science and Technology and Ecology in 2005. This is the most profound reason behind the disregardness of the women in the water governance. So this burden disproportionately affects the Dalit women who are traditionally responsible for fetching water and for who are sole and whole responsible for the water management in their households. So we have, if we focus on the specifically on the Indian aspects, so we have an example that in Karnataka, women have organized collectively to demand the equitable access to the water resources by forming the self-help groups and collaborating with the non-governmental organizations. They have successfully installed the community water pumps, advocated for the stricter enforcement of the anti-discrimination law. So this is the thing, these efforts highlights that the importance of recognizing and addressing the intersectional dimensions of the water inequities to empower the marginalized women. So to keep these all the things in the mind, we will go through that. We have the dire need of a robust feminist approach to reverse the global water crisis or the water governance and policies. So I have the two approaches in my mind. That is the ecofeminism that has been, coined by the Francois de Eudebon. And specifically, if we go to the, hydrofeminism, that also includes in the ecofeminism. Feminist theorist, there is a famous feminist theorist that is the Astrida Nemans, draws a post-humanist and a new materialist perspective to explore the entanglement of the water, gender, and the bodies. So there is a need of that. There is a dire need of that feminist approach that has to be looked out in every water policy and governance in any particular country, because the significance of the women's inclusion in the water peace process are enormous. As we look about the UN data, over the 90% of the world population lives in the country that shares the basins. These are the basically transboundary basins waters. Approximately the 40% of the world population is found in the transboundary basins. And out of that, 50% of the population living in the world's river basins are the women. So women's inclusion in the water policy and governance is a must. Women provide the diverse perspectives. It promotes the gender equality. Sorry. It ensures the sustainable water management. So there are, if we go by that stance, there are so much benefits of including the women in the water governance. It's about, I have already told that this is added to the new perspective, innovative ideas, creating new opportunities, by women's linkages with the various networks are very advantageous to get the diverse perspective in the water policy. Okay, so approaches in the mediation negotiations often yields positive results if we include the aspects of the women in the water policy. So it's a kind of the if there is a more women, it will be a better choice. And we have so many examples in regarding that thing. If we can we have so enormous case studies, that is the Pians River Basin. So from Tajikistan, Nile-based Raven, there has been so robust role of the women in organizing the, water peace processes. In Kazakhstan, there is also that has the water commission is the testament to the female leadership. I am talking about the on the world level aspects. So if we go by the, on the aspects of the India generally provides the compelling examples of the grassroots, of examples of the gender mainstreaming, and that is spearheaded by the women, showcasing the principles of the hydrofeminism in action. So one of the notable cases is that the work of the women in the Alwar district of the Rajasthan, who revitalized the traditional water harvesting structure known as the Johad. We Rajasthani used to call the pond as a Johad. So in that thing, in the Alwar district, the woman has a very significant role in maintaining the harvesting structures in the Alwar district of Rajasthan. And that grassroots, organizations had been led by the, Tarun Bharat Singh. So it's kind of the woman played a crucial role in rebuilding these structures and replenishing the groundwater level, ensuring the water security specifically for their communities. And we have also the so much examples. We have the example about the Maharashtra case. The women of Hivare Bazaar village have been very instrumental in the implementing the watershed implement practices and all. So if we go by the the environmental and the nature, the role of women has been regarded as the very enormous or very significant. We have so many examples. The Narmada Bachao Andolan, there is a significant examples about the role of the woman in the in that water governance and policies. And if we talk about this specifically about the activist, the women activists such as the Meda Patekar, she has a great role, role in the highlighting the social and environmental cost of the, displacing communities, highlighting the social and economic cost of the unsustainable water infrastructure projects. So various women have the various significant role in their, in their on their aspects. So research on the women leadership has found that women's flexibility, diplomatic and the negotiation skills, understanding and the inclusion of the local context perspectives play a decisive role or significant role in reaching the agreements on the sensitive water issues. If we talk about the specifically about the representation and the recognition, so there is significant mention of the role of the woman in this conference, as you are seeing in the slide, that has been happened in the Dublin, Ireland, 1992. And there is also the mention in the United Nations Millennium Summit. If we talk about on the aspects of the India, the South Asia Young Women in the Water, that is the platform where we can find the enormous research on the how the women are adapting, how the women are going through the in handling the water issues and the water governance and policies. And there is also a task force on the women empowerment in the management, that is popularly known as, is a kind of the NGO that has a significant role in that thing. Various NGOs have also the different meanings and roles and regulations. We have example that around the 2,444 water user associations have been established and reinforced through the West Bengal accelerated development of minor irrigation projects. I'm talking about the India thing. Then in 2028, water user associations have commenced delivering the paid irrigation services. So in these water user organizations, water user associations, women have very significant role in managing that thing. So this is all about the representation, but however, they are still unrepresented in the water management. This is all the data has been given in the even in that thing about the on the aspects of the UN. And if we talk about the India thing, India is still has to go a long way to go to in achieving gender mainstreaming, particularly in the high level decision making and the governance. A significant indicator of this disparity is the low representation of the women in India's national parliament. There is a data in the 2023, women occupied only the 15.2% of the parliamentary seats in India, compared to the global average of the 26.7%. This is the data has been taken from the gender data portal that is operated by the World Bank. And so that's all the thing. According to that World Bank, women hold just 1 in the 4 jobs in the global hydropower industry. Because based on the social norms around the woman's ability to do the technical jobs or lack of the gender sensitive policies in the workplace are some of the barrier that inhibits the successful recruiting, the retaining of the women in the water sector. So if we go by these data or research, then we find that there is still a way to go to define the role of the women in the water management and policy and governance. So India has to go a long way in maintaining that thing. So that's why we have to consider that thing. The women has a very significant role in the water policy governance. And rather than, if we talk about, other than the aspects of the water governance, we can show the recent example of the role of the women. You can show in the recent news the Pahalgam terror attack after this incident. So 2 female officers, has a very great role in the in carrying out these operations Sindoor. So we have to admit that thing. The woman has a very robust negotiation skills by the inclusion of those by inclusion of this sector into the hydro diplomacies and the transboundary basins water security framework or the local water issues. It can be beneficial for any country. So now the bottom line of all my of the research that the women have the unique insights in the water needs of the household and local communities. Natural resources management is more likely to be prioritized in the peace negotiation when the women are included. Active and the substantive participation of the women in the decision-making process, it contributes to the development of more effective governance system. It enhances the accessibility. It promotes the fair and equitable allocation of the resources. And lastly, the gender role can prevent the women participation in the conflict resolutions more robustly. So we have seen so many examples regarding that I have already told about in my previous slides. So these point has to be considered any country's government to make the water policy and the governance holistically. And to get a more nuances of that thing, how the women in the water policy and governance are stigmatized. So I have wrote a one paper that has been published in the Cambridge Journal of the Political Affairs. It's all about the stigmatization of the women in the water policy and governance. It's a kind of the consequences of the populist governance. And if you want to read more more stuff on that thing, so you can go to that UN document and the IUCN documents. So there are a lot of gender documents available on the gender data portals. And I have also meant about the various NGOs and the water user association that has been significantly working in the India on the aspects of the role of water and gender. So you can go through the research also. So that's all from my side, and I'm welcome to the more questions for the forward to the discussions. Thank you for patiently listening me about these things because this is very important to have a research on this important significant topic. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pintu Kumar. If I may request you to close your presentation so that we can have a good overview. Thank you so much. I'll just start with discussing with you because some things which you raised really alarm and also very optimistic way of looking at it, and the very purpose why Water Resources Council of the Women's Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry is set up, by the way, in India now, and we are already 5 years old with nearly 100 women leaders in the water sector who are united together to very much make the point which you are trying to really raise through your presentation. But before I open the discussion, I want to also bring on record some striking data, especially because you mentioned the point of women leadership, and also you raised the point in Parliament. Right from World Bank's data on 1 in 4 hydropower, 1 woman in 4 hydropower sector, I'm just looking at, and I also published a paper on it, by the way, where are women in leadership in India's environment and water. And it is extremely, I will say disturbing. While we had only one woman prime minister and now the second woman president in the country, but similarly, in now 77 years, I should say,
Yeah.
78 for that matter. And similarly, the figures in other ministries, especially related to the topic which we are talking today, are equally disturbing. And I'm going to now give you those points to really raise this discussion on women leadership, because there's a lot of talk about gender disparity in water from the vulnerable side, but less is talked about from the leadership side. And I'm really happy that at this point in time we are discussing this as women being change, not only change maker, but they have the potential to be peacemakers also. And there is a good scholarship available on it. But let me just first put on record, in the Ministry of Environment and Forest, and now which is also climate change, since it is formed in 1984, we had only 2 women ministers. One is of course Uma Bharti, and and also now we have, sorry, in Ministry of Water, I must say, we had only one woman minister, who is Uma Bharti, and that is formed in 2011. So Ministry of Water Resource anyway is too late in India, but then she was in 2000 there. Then we have only two minister from Ministry of Environment and Forest since it is formed, that is Menka Gandhi and Jayanti Natarajan. So I'm talking about 78 years, and you see that, and if you look at their tenure, then also it becomes extremely disturbing. I'm just talking about they being on the position, but when you look at the tenures, they even don't have their full tenure. We had only two ministers in the Ministry of Defense. Indira Gandhi naturally became Ministry of Defense twice. And we had Nirmala Sitaraman only for 2 years. Again, the term problem. Then in the Ministry of External Affairs, we have had only 2 ministers. I'm talking in terms of bringing this intersectionality of leadership in water, environment, and peace and all. In Ministry of External Affairs, we again had only 2 ministers so far. And again, the terms are very disturbing, but Indira Gandhi becoming a natural, taker of the external affairs, being prime minister. But apart from that, we only had Sushma Swaraj, not again the full term, but part term. When I look at these figures at the top, and then when I also look at hardly barely 11% of our parliamentarians, and now probably 17% are women, I am not really surprised if the women issues are not addressed in a mainstream policy, as well as when the funding is dispersed, the issues of needs of women, that they are different than the issues of needs of men, are not covered in the funding disbursal. So this is where the absence of women in the top position also impacts the most vulnerable women, whom everybody wants to solve their problem. So, and it is not getting solved because unless and until we don't know what is their problem, how will we solve the problem? So understanding of the problem becomes extremely tricky there. But I want to just now go back to your research itself, where you really gave some hope on your deductive approach of looking at the idea of hydrofeminism and talking about how the concept is going to be developed, or it is developed, because I was also keen to see if the scholarship is available from your presentation. The between feministic theories and environmental justice, which are very well established scholarships, and how do you intend to build the idea of hydrofeminism, and especially how hydrofeminism and hydrodiplomacy can be looked at, particularly when we have more than 300 transboundary conflicts going around in the world. And not surprising at all, and none of those have any women leaders either, uh, on either side of it, and not even in the arbitration. We are hosting Indus Water Treaty for over 60 years, and until now, we never had a woman sitting on board and discussing how the most decorated peace treaty ever the world ever had, which is Indus Water Treaty, was discussed without the presence of women leaders. And still, when we are thinking of suspension, there are no women discussing whether it is required or not. I will stop here and hand it over to Sonia to take her role. But it was very, very moving and emotional for me to hear you out. And it's this whole leadership discussion is not there. There's so much of discussion on women being vulnerable, and I am constantly nagging about the point that unless and until we work on women leadership, the vulnerable women issues can never be solved. Over to you, Sonia.
Thank you, Mansee. Thank you, Dr. Pintu. Yes, I think Mansee has given a very, very comprehensive reaction, I would say, if it's a little going above response to your presentation and what it brought out in her, because as you know, she's founded this organization wherein she's been literally collecting women across India who have been working in the water sector somehow or the other. But yes, well, I would say, Mansee, that most of the women that you have brought together are privileged, but
Yes.
At the same time, you have reached out to women who are grassroots activists, who have they are not even conscious of a greater war, but they have done it because they have felt that that is the thing to do. You have brought these women also to the fore. But at this point, I'm really interested in listening from Dr. Pintu. Like Mansee, one slide really caught my attention. Not only attention, it kind of moved me a lot, is the one that says women and girls face greater exposure to gender-based violence. Now, I don't really see any examples of that. Would you please tell us a little more about it? This violence part, because the overarching idea behind putting women in leadership, and I take full responsibility for being very, very sexist, is that if women come into leadership roles, then this violence will definitely decrease. It may be a hypothesis, but I totally believe in that. And which is why I really want to know from you the gender-based violence that women and girls have been exposed to, some examples and a little bit of history behind that, so we can understand how, and also, yes, so when you talked about the grassroots activism in certain parts of the world, your experience in studies or fundamental experience where these violence issues have been addressed by women. So first, about the violence, yes.
Yeah, of course, that's a great remark on the scholarship. So, justly, if you have mentioned about the violence thing. So I have mentions, I have taken the so many examples. Out of that thing, I have already mentioned about the the violence on the women in the aspects of the water policy and governance. So I have given the example about the Karnataka issue. If we talk about the grassroots level thing, so in Karnataka, if we saw that women, have organized collectively, organize and protest collectively to demand equitable access to the water resources, and by forming the because there is one thing we has to keep in mind: water is power, and power can be wielded. And we can see that in India, patriarchy has been or had been a very big role in the in framing the decision policy and framework. So because of that thing, women has faced a lot of things and a lot of exclusion, faced the exclusion from the main decision making, or facing the issues of the gender mainstream. I'm talking about the India's conditions. So particularly in India, in Karnataka, women have organized the self-help groups to raise their demands, to raise their particularly the water demands, basically to form the self-help groups for collaborating with the non-governmental organizations. They have successfully installed the community water pumps, and the advocates for the strict enforcement of the anti-discrimination law. And this is the well established research by the professor Acharya. So he mentioned about the how the women are facing the dilemma of exclusion from the water policy and governance. Maharashtra has a very significant example in the when we show the what is the role of that woman in the framing those water policies and governance. I have already given the example about the Havre Bazaar village. So this is also a dilemma for that thing. See, if you have noticed that thing, the I have mentioned about the Havra Bazaar village in the Maharashtra. That protest has been in the leadership of the male, but in the leadership of the male, most of the workers in that leadership, these are the women. So it's a kind of that stuff, if we focus, you will get more understanding of that thing if I will go through the politics area. Suppose if you always heard about the nexus of the political leaders and the criminals. Sometimes this is not the right way to put the comparison, but to make the more understanding more, I was just mentioning that the nexus of the criminals and the political leaders. Sometimes at any period, criminal might think that I can also vote for the elections also. Okay, so if we put that similarity or comparison, not literally, I'm not comparing the criminals to the women, but in case of the comparison, if I put it correctly, if women working under the leadership of the male, why can't they work solely independently or on the leadership aspects? So this is our India's problem, and we have to mitigate that thing thoroughly. See, woman has to come up with the on the first stance, on the very topmost stance, to mitigate all those of things. Women have to be included in the policy framework, in the parliamentary thing, because I have just already mentioned the water is power, and power is can be wielded. So if we want to change something, we have to change the selection criteria in the political regime. We have to get the vast number of the women leadership in the parliamentary. That is the only thing. And most of our renowned scholars, like the Baba Sahib Ambedkar, they already said about the thing. If anyone has to change in the society, so they have to come in the mainstream. That is the only way to mitigate these societal problems. That is the only thing. So we can mitigate by implementing those inclusion of the women, more and more women in the parliamentary thing. So it's a significant issue. And in the world, we have the greatest example amongst us, that is of the New Zealand. As we show that in the corona times, New Zealand is the only country that has managed so profoundly in that in the corona times. So we have to learn from the world scholarships, and this is the main my research thing, that is the woman has to include it in the mainstreaming thing. Through
Right.
this way only we can mitigate those inequalities, intersectorial activities on the aspects of the water policy and governance. Thank you.
Right. I'm glad you brought up, uh, the continuation of what Mansi was saying about scholarship, and you also brought to the fore the example of such examples that can be role models. That is extremely important to do, because if it has happened somewhere, I'm sure it can be also applied elsewhere with certain modifications. And it is extremely important that we understand that model that worked somewhere. You talked about Karnataka, you talked about Alwar, and you talked about uh, Maharashtra, maybe a little differently. But did you in your studies think, or do you think that through the model, you can actually use that as a role to be followed by other parts of the country uh, too? Because when we talk about leadership, it has to come from both ends, top down and bottom up. It cannot happen one way. This is what I feel. And in that case, this is a fantastic way of replicating the bottom up approach, which is what every big movement, including our independence, only happened because the bottom got riled. So does your study say that these role models can be taken somewhere else? And you talked about the New Zealand model of governance, which we know what happened. She was there, and then she stepped down. So there must be something that is killing women, even at the top. So yes, any comments about that? Your idea about replication of models? Yes.
Of course, and that's a main important thing. But you have mentioned about it has to be carried out on the both of the ends. But somehow I feel that it is more important to be carried out, this dilemma from the bottoms up approach. Because if you are saying that if you can carry out those things from the top down approach, so there is a curiosity in my mind about the asking that thing, who will decide what to include or what not to include? Who will decide that thing? In the current scenario, women have the low representation. So of course, the male domination will decide everything from the top down. So top-down approach cannot be a role model for the, if we want any big change in the water diplomacy leaderships and the water management leaderships on the stance of the women. So if we go by the bottom approach, that will be beneficial for the society to have a great leadership in the women. And that's how you just mentioned about the New Zealand aspects, that later on she got stabbed out of the positions in the corona times. But that's why these examples shows that the bottom approach is the more beneficial for the society rather than the top down approach, because ultimately woman has to decide for herself. Firstly, whenever she decide for herself, then can she decide for the society. But if we go by the society to the woman, that if the society is deciding something for the woman, it can be crucial. The woman has to decide for herself, then go for the society. We have seen lot of examples in our Indian society where the society has put a lot of restrictions on the role of the woman. We have the very, very great examples. So if we will go by the top down approach, it can be, it can be more crucial. It can be more harmful for the leadership. It is better to go by the bottom approach. That's a very, very beneficial for their self or the society also. We all know about the role of the woman in our household. By the grace of God, they got the so much skills. If we put those skills into the man leadership and gender mainstream, it can be a win-win situation for any country to have the woman in the in the leadership or in the mainstreaming thing. So that's the thing. So I always prefer to have the bottom approach, from the bottom to a top approach, rather than the top down
I
approach.
agree. I agree. And, there's one slide that you have in representation, and I was amazed to see 1992, then 2000, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
some
yeah.
kind of movement happening. And post that, we don't see any kind of movement, any kind of any platform that is actually going to be in people's memory. This is 25 years ago. And then you go on to say, yes, I mean, the statistics are fine, but I'm just, because you are doing a PhD, I'm uh, uh, really curious about when you did, I'm sure you did some fundamental research, and what was your feeling or idea that when you spoke with women, how is it that it never carried through as a movement? Did you get any feedback on that?
Yeah, of course. But on the first point of your first point, okay, after the 1992, we haven't seen any major improvement in that thing. But I want to say that if we go on the world level, so we can go to the World Bank documents. They have mentioned about the timeline of the timeline of about the gender mainstreaming, uh, particularly specifically on the role of women in the water governance and policies. So they have mentioned all these things about the role of the woman in that thing. But I wanted to mention the one thing, to have a democratic government, it is very necessary to have the democratic society. See, the purpose of my mentioning this very conceptual thing is that most of the time government has done a lot of things about the any particular gender, but however it is the society that neglects those concepts, neglects those decision making, because on the society aspects, the most of the all type of the genders are very much particular or the personal in getting all these benefits of the decision of the government. So firstly, it has to be the democratic society for the democratic government. So whole of the society has to accept that. Firstly, on the very first instance, whole of the society has to accept that women leadership can like a boom in the in framing the policy and governance and the decision making. That is my aspect on the first query. And on the second query of the aspects, that is the key. Yes, since I'm living in the since I live in the Rajasthan, so as particularly there is apprehension that the Rajasthan has a very has been go by the very lot of the water scarcity issues. So women there has to, face a lot of difficulties in fetching the water. If I talk about the, if I talk about the my earlier times, my mother has to go a long way to fetch the water. Slowly and slowly, these things are getting improved. But this is not the thing that has to be considered by the top most leadership. It has to be go from the lower level. See, there is a thing that if you want to change in the country, you have to change your home first.
Agree.
So,
Absolutely.
so on the societal aspects, women has to come up with their, come up with their boldness in the, they have to show that they can do a better leadership in this, in the whatever we call this patriarchal world. So this is has to be considered on that thing.
Right. Yes, I agree.
I hope
Um,
I hope I answered you correctly.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Uh,
And my last question before I give over to Mansi is the recent news about how the Pahalgam terror attack. You've put in one sentence over there.
yeah.
I would like to know why. What is
May
your what is your
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
maybe because in our society women has to face a lot because all the gender other than the women they have thinking like that that we should have the dominance about the any leadership and all. But without going so much into that negative aspects, I have just mentioned to show that this gender has the capability to change for good. See, it is not necessary to take an example from the water sector only. So we can learn from the other sectors also.
You're talking
See,
about security also as your title, so
yeah,
that is
yeah,
absolutely on target. But
yeah,
you had
yeah,
a reason to put that sentence. Yes.
yeah. That's why I have put it to show to have a showcase about the role of the woman in that thing. They have the capability. And the main thing that the no one will decide, no one has to decide or no one can decide for them. They have to decide for themselves only. Okay, and they in the in the recent example they have set the exemplary thing that the most of the our society has a apprehension of the thinking that women can't join the armed forces. So there's the another area of the research, but this example has shown to the society that key women can do.
Mansi, would you
Yes.
like to say something?
Yes, I would like to jump in, and also we will have to start wrapping up things
Yes.
and keeping the latest Pahalgam issue and also deep condolence to the deceased during the terror attack. But more importantly, we have to understand that the war also brought so many equal number of casualties. So I don't know. I am in two minds whether what was worse, whether the terror attack was worse or the war was worse. I am writing an article about it. That can we continue killing? So I don't want to discuss that part, but definitely the role of women leadership in in spirit and in tokenism is something which we need to discuss very hard. And that is where I agree on one part, that it has to be bottom up. And I very subtly pointed out by Dr. Pintu that if it is top down, then we really don't have, I will say, the reference or the bearing. What are the characteristics we are looking for in women leadership? I have serious issues, you know, Sonia. I mean, in the tokenism way of leadership, and in water sector also we see a lot of tokenism in the leadership, and uh, and that is why I listed those names of ministries in India, not only from water environment but also defense and external affairs ministers, and they were highly respected people and went to the top by merits and not through tokenism. So it's a long path. But having said that, I was very keen to also really see how leadership really makes a difference. And Dr. Pintu gave very interesting example of COVID time, and not to forget that KK Shailaja from Kerala, the health minister then, was globally applauded for her effort. Apart from all, I mean, there is a very interesting study which showed how all the women leaders from around the world, the countries that had women prime minister and president, how they fared corona care, I must say. And here in India, 2 days ago, we learned that we highly undercounted our deaths in corona. So keeping that aside, yes, leadership matters. But also another thing where I am really keen to see how Dr. Pintu's work can be looked through peacemaking and peacekeeping for that matter. And I cannot really close the conversation without mentioning Angela Merkel, the woman, one of the most revered woman leader, I must say, ever the world will produce, who took the uh, very difficult decision to get rid of the nuclear energy from Germany, and for the very good reason that it should not really sit to trigger this kind of anxiety to get into conflict with neighboring states. I mean, these are very interesting topics, but we have to focus on water conflicts. And what was very important for me to understand here, when we are talking about the 40% of the world population living in water conflict zones, not literally water conflict zones, but they live in the transboundary water zone. And today in India, right now, we are really having very sour relationship. And that's my next paper coming up, by the way, hopefully soon by this weekend. We have so sour relationship for all the transboundary water, be it with Indus water with Pakistan, or we can look at the Mahakali Treaty with Nepal, we can look at the Teesta Treaty with Bangladesh. And all these treaties are coming closer to renewal, but at the same time, they are also a conflict which is hanging between the countries, as we can see. And I am very worried about weaponizing water as a tool instead of using it as an instrument of peace. And when we study water as conflict means, we also see, and I'm privileged to work on the Indus Water Treaty as well, as an instrument of cooperation. So I'm very keen if sometime Dr. Pintu and all, we all can sit together and talk about more on this rigor of hydrofeminism and hydrodiplomacy. I really missed that conversation today. I will be very honest on it. But how can hydrofeminism trigger hydrodiplomacy towards peace? That is probably a burning question, but I don't know. I don't have grants to work on it. I'm sure, Pintu, Kumar, you can raise this in your department. I know some of the Ostrom scholars at Tusha there, but also at Tempe with the University of Arizona. So we can think about it. And definitely there's a huge gap, not only in terms of women leadership, but even the scholarship that we are talking about on hydro diplomacy and hydrofeminism, which also means that there is a lot of opportunity. There is gap in scholarship, means more researchers are required, and it's a chicken and egg situation. I mean, I would like to close with this line when Dr. Pintu said that for a democratic government, you need a democratic society. That's a chicken and egg situation, and very likely for having more women leadership, you have to have more stronger base in the society, and it goes back to education, education, and education. And I think that's where we are talking about more water education to more people. And states like Rajasthan really stand as exemplary, which has produced enormous number of grassroots water women leaders. But again, unfortunately, we don't name them. But thankfully, the only water compendium which was produced by UNDP, CV, and the Ministry of Jal Shakti has actually brought out those 40 odd women leaders from grassroots. And we are at Wiki Water Resource Council. We are trying to talk about water leaders from the professional circle. I don't mean that they are not grassroots leaders. Neither I mean that the grassroots leaders are not professional. But now we have to work on how to find grassroots leaders and so-called water professionals who can be married, so that we have this problem of chicken and egg a little bit better solved. Lot of conversations required, but we have a time limit. Thank you so much, Dr. Pintu Kumar Mahla, for this conversation and especially triggering this discussion. And I hope you find some scholar to work on this gap, which we have discussed today. And I also hope there are more scholars to talk about gender mainstreaming. And it is always a delight to hear about gender mainstreaming, talking about women on one point, but also taking that as a subject. And I will wait for a day when gender streaming also talks about men in water, especially because we have to start talking about what wrong men have done, because we are constantly talking about how to bring women there because women are better off. And I think we have reached a stage in society where we have to start shaming the wrongdoings. Especially my heart goes out by reading the news that 50 children died in Palestine in last 2 days. And I mean, I can't think of anything else, to be honest. I am doing water show, but my heart is just broken with this whole fact. And these are all men leaders with egos. So we can't do much about it. And the worst part is that more than 50 days, food is not reaching them. So this is not a political platform, but still we have to talk about these things, because if there were women leaders, children were thought about, water would have been thought about, water security would have been thought about, safety of women would have been thought about. I have pulled out history, literature a lot to look at if women have ever made wars. I know there are one or two when women have initiated wars. Other than that, never in the history of human civilization. I hope more women leaders come and they talk about peace. Within that, of course, we are talking about a peace and ecology and hydrodiplomacy and hydrofeminism. Thank you so much, both of you. And thanks, Sonia, once again, for remaining on one side of the Friday Waters Thesis Club. And see you soon. Before I close the session, I would like to announce the next session also. Next week, Wednesdays for Water, we have a very interesting session on May 21st at 5 p.m. IST. We discuss listening to the fragiles, and we talk about reflections from the Western Ghats. The joining links will be at the website. On next Friday, Water Arts, we have Goa Water Stories, which is a series with Living Waters Museum, which is on May 23rd at 5 p.m. All the information will be at our website, www.w4w.in. Do stay tuned with us, because we strongly believe water conversation is the way towards water conservation. Thanks a lot. Please take care.